Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Audio Advice live streaming giveaway. Where today we got a really good one. Not that all of our live streams aren't good, but this one's particularly awesome. So I'm really excited to tell you guys more about it here in a second. But we're joined by some of our good friends over at Perlisten Fidelity Imports and a familiar face below me, probably on your screen. Let's go through introductions. And we got two Erics on here. So Big E, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
Internal joke. Me and Eric are always confused. So I'm Big E. He's Little E, and it sticks. So sorry about that, Eric. I'm Eric from Perlisten Audio. I'm CTO. And one of the engineers as well. As most people know, Perlisten is really based on good engineering principles to get us a long ways into making a great sounding loudspeaker. And hi out there.
Awesome. Well, we like to kick these off with kind of a fun starter question. So the one today, we're going to do, what's your favorite non-traditional demo track? So one that if you go to an audio show or somebody showing off their system, they're probably not playing. So what you got?
Oh, yeah. So I got one that's called Stunt Rhythms, and it's called Two Fingers. It's really gritty, kind of goes back to my heavy metal roots, but it's kind of EDM kind of bass, but it's got a heavy kind of distorted line. It's got some heavy bass throughout it. It's just really fun to crank. We do it every demo at least once. We may not share it as a demo, but after we get everything set up, we always crank it at least once.
Awesome. Well, Eric, Little E, you want to go next?
Yeah, the reason I'm called Little E is because Eric with a K, because he spells it wrong, is about 1.5 feet taller than I am. So let's just get that clear right now. I am the Director of Education for Fidelity Imports. So I'm the person when our dealers have questions about product, they call me and I go out and I do events like I'm doing here with Audio Advice. I'm doing some trainings on the new A series from Perlisten. So we're going about talking about the product and running demos for the stores.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna get the same question for you as well. So what's your favorite non-traditional demo song?
My favorite non-traditional demos, I like to torture people in my audience because it's all about me and making myself smile. So I generally do K-pop. My favorite is BTS Dynamite. One of the reasons is because everyone just cringes. It's like, oh, I can't believe you're playing that. It's, but the recording is actually not bad, and it does have does have some good bass response, so I can get away with it.
At least it's not baby metal.
Although I have to put in a good plug for Bandmade, which is another Japanese. They all wear maid outfits, but they can shred. Actually, I've seen them once.
Very cool. We're gonna have to make a really eclectic 4-song playlist on here. So Randy, what's your addition? Well, first of all, introduce yourself. I just assume people know you already. So give us.
I'm Randy. I'm the Chief Technical Officer over at CheapAudioMan Industries.
Well, go and grab a cup of coffee. And what's your favorite next question?
I did have a comment about K-pop. The true irony about K-pop is that it's going to save physical media for the next generation. So anybody that gives K-pop garbage, they shouldn't, because if you go to Target, there's an entire end cap, and it's not for me. It's not for any of us. It's for the younger kids, right? So the fact that younger kids are buying physical media today should be like, we should throw a parade for K-pop. Really, we should, because we're old and we think it's all about us, but it's not. It's about the next generation that's going to make this stuff live on. I think so I was thinking about this, and I think it's anything off of BC Boys' Hello Nasty. A flawless record. It's recorded really well. There's a lot of spatial stuff on there. And there's a ton of bass. But Intergalactic is the one that most people know. But that whole record is like really outstanding.
Yeah, no, that's a really good album.
And you were too.
What was that?
What's that?
Paul's Boutique as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll introduce myself. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick. I host these. I design theaters and do a little bit of everything else. So my addition for this would probably be Do I Ever Cross Your Mind, which is Dolly Parton and Chet Atkins. They did a live recording, and it's absolutely awesome. if you guys have been on here before, you know I'm a huge old country fan, so I would classify that as country folk. So very cool. But this is a fun one. I was flying through this because we need to get to questions because we got some good giveaway prizes. We're going to announce giveaway winners at the end. We got 2 categories. One's going to be for best question, and one's going to be just a random giveaway. So if you're viewing live right now, you're super lucky because you can actually ask questions and have a chance to get those answered, and you get a really awesome prize. So we'll start off with the let's go with the just random giveaway prize. Eric, do you want to introduce that? Whichever Eric wants to. That's why I just said it in the middle. I went right in the middle.
We're giving away our 8S, right? So
yeah. So that's
that's pretty cool.
Yep. So that's going to be the main giveaway prize. So the R8S. So tell us a bit about the sub.
Yeah, it's so there's quite a few great subs out there, right? So we knew this had to be really, really high performing. So this actually has 30 millimeters of X-Max. So crazy amount of X-Max, 600 watts, single input RCA and XLRs. It's a hefty little beast, but it really serves a great market, as in a lot of people don't want to sacrifice too much output, but they don't have a lot of space. You gotta maybe you got a small computer desktop, you got a small office, or you got a small listening area, and so a lot of output in a compact space is always cool to see. And the first time you see it move peak to peak, it's pretty cool to see. It'll put a smile on anyone's face.
Yeah. So for those who are not engineers, X-Max is how far the driver moves in and out.
Yep. Linearly, not just garbage, just distance. It's actually a linear amount. So, long story short, it moves a long way without distortion, and that's always a good thing, right? So that's what we aim for. It has all the DSP and app functionality, so we don't degrade, from even our flagship subs. It's exactly the same kind of functionality with pure delay, phase, gain structures inside to maximize signal and noise, the A to Ds on the inputs. I mean, there's just a ton of really 30 PQs. There's a lot you can do. So no, it should be fun for anyone. It's a great sounding sub.
Awesome. Yeah, I had a chance. You guys had this at Expona, I think, is where I heard it.
Yeah, we did. It was pretty interesting. So we had our R5Ts, and we had 2 of these in a room. You kind of know the general size of those rooms. They're not huge, but they're definitely not what you would expect an 8-inch to do. And one of our high-end dealers was kind of being a smart aleck, and he's like, "Hey, play this song," and none of us knew what it was, so we played it, and he's like, "Holy cow!" He says, "Like, I am buying a ton of those." So it really we play down to 10 hertz, and in a small room you can get some very reasonable output, 20 hertz and below. So yeah, it's a great performing sub. So
awesome. Yeah, well, this was exciting, and we've got another one that I'm going to lump this into 2 things, but we held off a little bit on showing the best question prize until recently for a reason. So first, tell the people what the best question prize is.
Actually, I don't know. Is that that's the sub, right?
Oh, well, sorry. Well, you know what? I'll go ahead and show it.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, it's Space A3m. So
yeah,
I missed that one. See, so observant.
So this is a really, really cool speaker. So why don't you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, so the A3m is really that monitor. So all of our nomenclature is A means A series, 3 means 3 drivers, M means monitor. We kind of have that nomenclature throughout the Perlisten lineup of all of our series. And what the goal was to have something a little more affordable for people that still had very high performance, but allowed more people to have access to the brand, and give them a chance to listen what we have. So same kind of target response that you're kind of familiar with Perlisten. We believe whatever's recorded should come out. So kind of that flat frequency response. But very high performing still. It doesn't have the DPC kind of patented technology that we have, but this is really a very close variation of that, and it has a little less performance and capabilities in that vertical directivity that we really follows through in the rest of the lines, but it's not far off of it. How we move the woofers closer together, how we design the waveguide, really ensures that we're still maintaining that control in the vertical and then having a really wide horizontal. So just a lot of performance and a lot of capabilities at a more affordable price point.
Yeah. So I mean, these a pair, what, like 3,600, somewhere right around there?
Yeah. So these are. I'm looking at my prices. Those are $17.95 each.
Yep.
Yeah. So 35.90 something, somewhere right around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, really cool. So we're super excited about this. And the A series, this was something that I personally really wanted. So whenever I heard it was coming out, I was like, when are these going to be available in America, and when can we sell them? So so we I guess it's our official announcement. So we're going to be the exclusive launch partner for the A series, and we couldn't be more ecstatic about it. So why don't you guys just give us a quick rundown of the A series and kind of your thoughts behind it?
Yeah, so the A series literally as a whole was, having some great 2-channel options. So the A3T, so again, 3 drivers, tower, and the A4T, 4 drivers, tower, giving you a little more maximum output capability, just slightly more sensitivity, but also giving you the opportunity to now have an affordable home theater as well. So you can take the A3m monitor, lay that horizontal, use that as center channel, and then you got the A2S as a surround, and then you can match that with the R series subs and have a really high performing home theater. It's 18 millimeters of X max on the 8-inch drivers that are used in this, so a little bigger drivers than we use in the other ones. In our other series, quite a bit of X max. So when I say they're high performing, I'm not even kind of just saying that out of and being out of touch. They really do have excellent output, and especially in room, they still follow our guidelines. You take a speaker that has a lot of output, and a lot of times it can be boomy in a room, but we still have that sealed. They're tuned really, really low, about 20 hertz, so that we're staying sealed. You still have that control, that transient response, that dynamic capabilities, and you kind of get still the same Perlisten sound that we expect.
Very cool.
Yeah. Spend a little bit of time with them this week in a couple different environments. So at the Charlotte store, it was in a very more intimate space, and visually they kind of dominated the space, but sonically they were absolutely fun. They were really easy to listen to through whatever kind of content you want on it, at whatever volume, no distortion, nice and clean, good soundstage. And then here in Wilmington, we put them in a completely opposite space. It's giant. It's very reflective. You would expect to have no bass whatsoever, and again, they're just performing spectacularly. So I'm really happy with the performance of the A series.
Yeah, there's quite a few new developments, like the tweeter and the waveguide. So it's a much larger tweeter than we've used in the past. It's a 35 millimeter, because now instead of having our DPC array with mid ranges around it, we have the tweeter has to play lower, so we're playing down to that 1.1, 1.2 kilohertz crossover region. So that driver has to do more to maintain that directivity down to where we like to, where it crosses over with the 8-inch mids, mid woofers, and at 1 kilohertz. So to maintain that directivity, the tweeter also had to play lower. There's a larger waveguide, so we get more gain at lower frequencies and control that directivity more. And then that allowed us to really shove those woofers closer together, so that you don't get that comb filtering and interaction between those 2 drivers at that 1 kilohertz crossover. So there's those are really kind of the things that we did to help mitigate the common issues that you have, and when you have an array like that, and that kind of mid tweeter mid kind of configuration. So all the problems we kind of designed out as much as possible, so they're very limited. And these have we have the plots for all the heat maps that kind of show you what happened on and off axis. And you can see that control is maintained almost down to 500 hertz on R series and such as that, because of the DPC and arrays. Those will really get down to even 300 hertz. So it's really not too far off from performance of R series. And that's really, really quite cool in the design.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited you guys are branching out to this price point. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a big hit. So, well, let's start the Q&A portion, because like I said, we're going to announce the Q&A winner at the end, and we've already got some really good questions in here. I've got my team starring them for me. So let's see. Let's pop in. So this is actually just right on what you were just touching on. So what purpose does the overlap between the tweeter cone and the mid-range driver serve?
Yeah, exactly. So the farther those woofers are away from each other, the lower in wavelength that, or higher in wavelength, we have issues of comb filtering. So shoving those closer together give us less of that issue, and the control the directivity off axis. And that, if you look at our data sheets on our downloads page, we have all of those data sheets. It really shows you the heat maps. And that those are instant graphs that really tell you what's happening off axis in the vertical and the horizontal. If we don't do that, then they start canceling with each other. They interact with each other. We get comb filtering. So that's really why shoving those drivers close together is really important, and playing the waveguide much lower to help mitigate that problem as well.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, this is a cheap one, but does the A series get CheapAudioMan stamp of approval?
The funny thing is I think I'm going to get some, maybe.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And the irony is, it's probably going to be the most expensive speaker that's ever been in my house. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure they're going to sound spectacular, but I have a hard time getting my head around a speaker that cost more than 3 of my first cars. So I'm gonna do my best. I'm sure they're gonna be great. I love Perlisten. It's just never been in the zip code for me, so it'll be fun. We'll listen to them.
Yeah. And that's one thing I like to say. It's like price is all subjective within this industry. It depends on who you talk to what they define as an affordable speaker and all that. And like the average person is probably not a cheap speaker by any stretch of the imagination. But once you get into this hobby and you realize that, there are speakers that cost more than my house, it starts to put things in a little bit more perspective. But no, I 100% get what you're saying.
Everybody's hobby is a little different, and I have quite a few people, usually it's friends and family, when they, kind of learn what you do, is like, why would anyone spend that much on some speakers? And it's, it's different for everyone. Their hobby's different. And I go, well, this guy, he loves old cars, and he spent $80,000 or $90,000 redoing this old car. This guy loves boating. He bought a boat. He got a trailer. He brought a truck to pull that, which is like $100,000 truck. And he's got a $50,000 boat, and he goes boating only in the summertime, or someone goes snowmobiling only in the wintertime. Well, they love that sport. These people really love music, and it's really important to them. It's what makes them happy. So when you kind of frame it in that perspective, if it's your hobby and it's what you really love and it means something to you, then it's really not much money. That's something that brings you happiness, and that's what it's all about, right? Is at the end of the day, you sit down and you relax and go, oh, the stress of the day goes away. How much is that worth to you?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So do you have to have can you find very affordable, great sounding products? Absolutely. And so there's options for everyone and every price point. And that's the great thing about audio. Right?
Yep. Yeah. You can spend, a few $100s or a few $100,000 if you really want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So Greg asked, will the A series surround speakers blend okay with the R series, or will you eventually have in-ceiling speakers for Atmos?
Yeah, at this point in time, many of you, if you've been watching us for a while, our breadth of product has just expanded exponentially. And so there's always an evolution of products that we are expanding upon. At this point in time, right now, no, there's nothing in development for Atmos. Would they blend in well with A series or R series? Yeah, they could as well. We do believe in the same targets off axis performance. There is some of the tonality of the materials used. The R series uses the same tweeter material, so that's one start there. The paper cone does have a little different tonality to it, just because materials each have their own tonality. But as far as targets, they're very well matched throughout, even S series, R series, A series. So we get a lot of questions about, can I mix and can I match? If timbre matching is your ultimate goal, no. If you want to say, I want the best because I listen to 2-channel up front, want a great experience, and then I want to mix and match to kind of give you a more affordable price point, it's absolutely an option.
Mm-hmm. So timbre matching is an interesting concept, and a lot of people kind of get confused on what it means. So what's kind of one of your guys' explanation of timbre matching?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dominate the conversation. If anybody else wants to chime in here, please do. But timbre matching is not just, hey, I got the same materials and etc. It is about phase matching, and that is meaning those drivers play the same frequencies. They have essentially the same acoustic phase throughout the whole sound experience. And when we get into our upper echelon theaters, that's really what they're concerned with. And because the DPC, the waveguide, and then the tweeter on these are all you keep a family sound because they are designed, they're crossed over at the same point. Not very many companies do that. You say a lot of companies use the same materials, but crossover points for their in-ceiling versus their surrounds versus their fronts are generally very different. That means phase is going to be different. And the brain and the ears can really cue in on some of those things in specific frequencies. We are more phase potential to hear differences at certain frequencies, some not at all. And so those really differences are kind of the little tweaks that we do of why would somebody pay for Perlisten. That's why. Those are things that we're paying attention to how our subwoofers blend in with our mains. All those little details are things that we pay attention to throughout to make this system cohesive as possible. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that, but.
Well, I would also say if you lose something like a horn speaker in your front stage, but something with soft domes for your surrounds, there is they're diametrically opposed almost as far as their sonic characteristics. So as you get a surround system and the plane flies from the front to the back, it's going to sound different from the front than it is from the back. So you lose that active suspension of disbelief. So it's not quite as smooth and seamless sonically.
Yeah. Well, one of the examples that I always use is sound it's an oversimplification, but sound lives in between speakers. Think a stereo pair. Think that on a macro scale across the entire room. You want a sound to smoothly transition across the room. If you have something that sounds different, you're going to pick it up pretty quickly. So just a quick one.
Absolutely. A lot of the modern recordings now, they all use object-oriented recordings, so it's triangulation between speakers. So making an image sound between the speakers is and sound, amplitude, phase, and time from those 3 speakers to make it appear in that space. So again, the better placement, not necessarily more speakers, but the best placement will go a long ways too. So if you want something a little more affordable, it is larger spaces are actually easier to do than a smaller space, because in a small space you're off axis a lot farther from more speakers. So it's more difficult. A lot of us don't have giant rooms though, and those are the sacrifices we make.
Yeah, that leads me into another question on here. So I got a fun one that goes into. So Jack asked, what room size would you suggest for these speakers? And this was something that Little Lee was talking about before the stream. So I'm going to direct this one to you.
Little E,
yeah.
In my experience, they work great in pretty much any size room. Maybe not an auditorium, but the room I was just in earlier today was quite sizable. It was the entire front area of a store. So obviously that is going to be a bit of, like I said, a bit of a bass suck. So your bass response isn't going to be quite as much. You should always have subwoofers with any 2-channel system anyway. Yeah, had no issues with small rooms or large rooms.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask an offshoot question of this to Randy. So Randy, I'm sure you've listened to a lot of different systems in a lot of different spaces. So tonally, what kind of differences do you notice between the rooms that you've listened in, large versus small?
Whew. I mean,
Hard one.
That's a tough question to answer. I guess I'm not thinking about
That's
it.
kind of a loaded question.
It is. Yeah, it is a loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not thinking about it that way, really. I'm just thinking about how does it sound? If because I have really high ceilings, so there's zero chance that I'm going to do room treatment, and there's zero chance I'm going to do room treatment anyway because I think it's stupid. Just kidding. Anybody that likes room treatment, that's fine. It's fine. I have stuffed animals strewn on the floor, so there's a lot of absorption that way.
It all works.
So I do hear, like an echo occasionally, but I try not to get like too wrapped up with like what is the perfect room, what is the
yeah.
I've done this for 5 years. I've listened to a crazy amount of stuff, and what I'm coming back to is like, how does it make you feel? And how something makes you feel may have a lot to do with how it looks. Do you love the look of the speaker? Do you love the look of your amplifier? So yeah, I'm getting more into the feeling part of it than the science part of it. So, but yeah, stuff can sound good in any room.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like there's entire jobs wrapped around what makes rooms sound different and acoustics and all that. So that's a loaded one, but
acoustics are really, really hard. So a lot of people say, well, this is the placement I had my last pair of speakers in. That was perfect. And then you put a new speaker there, and I guarantee you it's probably not going to be in the best position for that speaker. It really performs, it excites modes in a different position in the room, and it will be different. And so that's, that little tweaky spot is not the same for every room. And sometimes most of us, right, we're limited to where we can put speakers. And so I've got a hallway over there, door here, my TV's here, so I need to put it here. And those are all acoustic sacrifices generally, but acoustics are really hard. This isn't, if just why when, Randy's perspective of I can find a spot in a room where it sounds good is not that too far off, because to get to the other end of where you really can predict and find the best spot is almost PhD level of work sometimes. Or it's just trial and error. So, we really struggle with how to say customers, this is the best position in your room, or try close to these areas. And somebody else has got a room and it opens up into another room, and that opens up into another room. And that acoustic is different than the, 12-foot by 16-foot by 8-foot ceiling room that someone else had, but theirs is open to every room. This one's a square room. Very different in acoustics. So, predicting subwoofers, where to place your speakers, those are all really complex problems.
And Perlisten's controlled directivity, though, does help take the floor and the ceiling out of the equation. I mean, they're still there, but you don't have to worry so much about the first reflections off the floor and ceiling.
Those are really your first floor bounce cancellation. Just like Randy said, he's not going to treat his ceiling. Well, 90% of us aren't going to treat our ceiling and our floor, and most of us don't treat our walls either. So just any little technological advance to say we didn't eliminate that problem, but we eased that problem, allows us to sound better, a better chance to sound good in more rooms. And that's something that's actually beneficial. We've had people measure even at the listening position, like, wow, that's flatter than I've ever measured before. Not because because we eliminated some of the problems, so it helped reduce.
So you're doing this through DSP or design?
No, that's all design. That's all passive and acoustic. And so that's where the patents for DPC array and stuff like that come into play. And that's where even the improved control on the A series is still probably better than 90% of the speakers out there.
You can be putting that on your marketing material. This speaker saves, it's $3,500 for a pair, but it saves you $1,800 in room treatment.
Yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
exactly. That's a great story. So yeah, see, you're hired. You see, our marketing team is failing.
There's ROI with this speaker.
Yeah, exactly. It is return on investment. So yeah, those are the things we're truly thinking about and behind the scenes, and, what you get. So,
Yeah, well, it's that controlled dispersions. For theater, it can work really well depending on there's some case where you want really wide dispersion, but I would say 95% of theaters are going to benefit from controlled dispersion to minimize some
there's
sort of
there's actually quite a
reflections.
few studies exactly on that, because if I have a ceiling speaker and it's butted up against the ceiling, we want the directivity from the speaker. Just like our in-ceiling speakers, there's no reflections off the back. We really have that same DPC control. Well, if it reflects off the back, it bounces off the sidewall, and then it reflects to my ear. It doesn't sound like it's from there. It sounds like it's from here. And that's
Yeah.
what you don't want. Same from your in-walls ceiling speakers. That directivity is actually really important in saying the triangulation calculation that your processors are doing, are saying, I want it to come from between the speakers. All those additional reflections can confuse that. And so those can be actually disadvantages. So those are, huge benefits in performance of a theater in that application.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna kind of go. We're gonna go to an interesting one, and I want to branch this off into another question. But what materials and how thick are the cabinet walls?
Yeah. So they are 25 millimeter MDF on the cabinet walls. The front is 50 millimeters of MDF. So there's double layers on the front. It's got, most of them have 3 or 4 additional braces depending on the size and internally. So there's many braces going on, very heavy duty and thick. And so, yeah, well designed, filled with Dacron stuffing as well internally. To help all those internal reflections as well.
Yeah. So this is my secondary question. I see people going around all the time. They go and test out a speaker, and the first thing they do is they give it a knock.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
it's like thumping a watermelon. It's like the first thing someone's going to do.
Yep.
So how good of a test is that? Inside of to test a speaker cabinet, is it indicative of a good speaker if it's dead?
Yeah, no, just like absolutely, because I did a really fun calculation at my CEDIA class. I just had CEDIA last week. I was teaching classes on how to calculate room gain and how to calculate SPL in a room. One of the cool little fun things I had the guys do was, like, we calculated the pressure inside a box. So, i.e., what's happening inside the subwoofer. So outside the room, it was 95 or 100 dB. Inside the box, it was 160 dB. So that's a lot of pressure, and that's flexing on your walls, and that's happening on your full range speaker as well too. So that does add coloration. If you knocking on it is what we all do. I do this exact same thing. How stiff, how dampened is it? And if those walls flex, they create a coloration. They create an additional sound that's not part of the source. So yeah, that's the same thing we all do. The number one thing I have to do is I have to tap on the cone, right?
Yeah.
How much bass is
You got to give it a little tap.
Just a little tap.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's
Yep. There you go. You got to do it.
Yeah. So I came from like the vintage audio market originally. So whenever I was like in beginning of college, I was selling some vintage audio gear, and you tap on those cabinets, and it's a totally different world compared to today. So yeah, I didn't know. Do you do that, Randy? Do you give it the tap test?
Yeah, occasionally. I remember I had this Yamaha. So Yamaha makes this 3-way speaker, is ultra cheap, and it sounded like you're tapping on the side of a 5-gallon bucket that you get at Home Depot. I mean, it was truly abysmal. Now, I've heard speakers that have a lot of cabinet resonance, and it kind of adds to the flavor, but there's a lot of them that are pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's people try to shy away from MDF as well. I'm like, MDF is fairly, as far as like resonance goes, it's a low resonant material.
Good luck.
It is. It's it's commonly available, but it is a great material, and we use the HDF, which is about a 35% more dense than standard MDF as well too. So that helps add to that density and damping material, damping of that wood material in the cabinet. Those are all quite important. So.
Well, HDF allows you to have a thinner wall, so you can have more space on the inside. So you can actually keep your outside side smaller, but your inside still have the cavity, the space.
Yeah, and bracing helps gain with all that too. So that internal bracing, you could go with a super thin material and have really a ton of bracing, and the thickness is the cube root for stiffness. So adding just a little bit of thickness adds a lot of stiffness, and so that's generally why we keep them pretty thick. Add braces.
I got a question for you.
Sure. Good, Randy.
So obviously, even though Perlisten or speakers are fairly in the aggregate expensive, you're still designing to a price point, and especially on this series, right? So, like, what is the best bang for your buck when you are making quote unquote sacrifices or something? Like, what's the hierarchy of speaker design? Where do you get the most bang for your buck, basically?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we really adhere to, and it's we've all had experiences of where you don't need the most expensive speaker in the world. You can take the best tweeter, capacitor, inductor, woofer and put them together, and maybe they're the highest regarded woofers, but if you do a terrible job combining them, making them into a system, it's going to sound terrible. And that's the same thing. You can take some pretty affordable parts and you can put them together, and if you do a great job, you can do a pretty good job, right? It's all about for us, it's about that power response. That's really what happens in a room. That's what we listen to. It is balanced frequency response. That's probably only 50% of the equation. The other 50% of that equation is how it reacts off axis, because that's how it loads the room. That's truly what you hear. Power response is reflection 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's all what happens in a room. We don't isolate. I don't only hear just the direct wave, right? We hear all of those reflections. And that's important. That's, a room out in your parking, listening to a speaker out in your parking lot really sucks. With no room, it's not a great experience, you can believe me. And so when you put it inside the room, that adds color, it adds benefit, it adds bass, it adds this realism to it. And so that power response is, as long as it's off axis is smooth, it's a downward sloping curve because those high frequencies had to travel farther because they bounced around the room. So the SPL goes down by the time it reaches your ear. But those are the level it should exactly represent the on axis response. If there's power response has any holes or notches in it, you can also see that in the directivity plots. See the directivity and it's got a big notch or dip or peak in it, you can inversely really correlate that to power response and go, it's got issues. That means off axis, it's not smooth. And that means that reflection, maybe it's got a huge notch at 1 kilohertz. Well, I hear the direct wave that has a nice even response, and then I got this reflection that doesn't resemble anything like that on axis response. Got a huge notch in it. We can't really tell time real easily until it gets pretty long, but we can tell 1 kilohertz to 1 kilohertz, there's a difference. And we may not even say, I can't walk in a room and say, there's a notch at 1 kilohertz. But we can say that speaker doesn't sound as good as that speaker that does have more balance to it. So we can kind of tell A to B on the similar frequencies. And that's essentially why we want good power response is I want good directivity and a lot of off-axis performance because that's part of the room. It's part of the listening experience.
I know you might find this
happen when you over-treat or under-treat or don't treat a room, kind of leading into what you had said, Randy. If somebody just said, I'm going to treat a room, and they just put a ton of stuffing on their walls in one frequency or one place, you may have a suck out at one single frequency, and now you screwed up the power response, and now that speaker doesn't sound as good as it could. So you can really mess things up by treating too much or the wrong space.
So
places.
pretend like I don't know what power response is and explain it to me like I'm 12.
Yeah. So there's two general things that we hear in a room, and that's the direct wave, right? So that speaker plays a signal and it comes directly to my ears. It's the first thing that hits. So it's the loudest, and it has the most representative of the frequency response of the speaker. So what we measure and maybe show on a data sheet, that's exactly what you hear. Power response is actually the power delivered, the energy delivered into the room. And that means it's not just a direct wave, it's everything. And so, like I said, that's reflections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 until the energy dies out. So that's the energy that bounces off the walls, bounces off the floors, bounces off the ceilings, and then it arrives at your ear. And our ear averages energy. We take all of that energy and kind of average it together. Our brain takes it and hodgepodges it together and saying, that's my listening experience. You can't isolate direct wave versus reflective wave. So to really narrow it down, it's what we actually hear in the room. It's all of the sound over a bandwidth of a certain amount of time. And that's our listening experience. And there's ways to tweak that and play with that. And that's kind of what we do with directivity, kind of eliminating, maybe controlling a little bit more of the bad stuff and kind of enhancing some of the good stuff from the width of the room. And you have a different size room, it's going to be different. But the sound power, if we do a good job, is pretty similar from room to room to room. The frequency response might be altered, but the sound power is pretty similar. And that's kind of the advantage of kind of having a little more capabilities of sounding good in more rooms.
Mm-hmm. So on that same vein, we got one here. So should you set up your? So they got A3Ms here. I'm going to expand this. Sorry, William. So this lineup with the dispersion characteristics, would they sound better with toe in or flat plane for stereo?
Yeah, and it kind of leads into what I was just talking about. Is there's a lot of listener preference, and it is really the size of the room may dictate that, and may also be dictated by your preference. So when we have toe in, you get pretty much a more exact representation of the frequency response as we share in our data sheets. You toe them out, and generally what you're balancing is kind of what I was talking about, is off-axis reflections versus direct reflections. If I toe them in more, I'm now further off axis on the sides of the speaker of what's reflecting off the wall and now coming back to me. And if it has farther to go when it's reflected, that means it traveled farther and it's lower in level. And so the direct wave might be, let's say, 90 dB, but that reflection traveled twice the distance and it is now 6 dB lower. And so that means the ratio of direct to reflected is on a different level. If you toe them out, it travels, it's closer to the first reflection, and that reflection level might go up. And so you're kind of balancing that. How much is the direct wave versus reflected wave and what I'm hearing? Some people kind of experience something that's a little different than another scenario, and they prefer that. Some people like a little more higher frequencies, so they may want it a little more direct. And that depends on a room. You may have one that has a wall that's close, and the other one may not have a wall that's really close. So you get this asymmetry of the amount of reflection, even from right speaker to left speaker. And that can change stereo imaging, where placement is, because I have a lot of reflections from one speaker and not as many from others, or at least in level. So those are really hard questions to answer. But that's what's happening in our room all the time. And the more symmetry you can give to a speaker, right and left, as far as reflections, maybe even distance away from the back wall, gives you depth and width. And those are things that, we all have our preferences, and we'll have to play around with.
There's a really cool speaker placement. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. It's called Sumiko Master Placement. I'm sure you guys have probably heard of that. But the Sumiko Master Placement is really neat. It's got a full page guideline on one speaker at a time, drawing it out and doing that. And I've done that in a few houses. It takes forever to do, but it's worthwhile. So basically you're just trying to find a nice balance in what sounds best in your room. There's not a correct, really, for most things in audio, there's not a 100% definitive correct answer. It's what your space is like.
Well, and a lot of times you go, I don't know, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear anything different. And those may be minute changes. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. So let's see. So I guess this one's kind of going back just a little bit, but with the A series bridging high fidelity and affordability, what specific cost-saving innovations were implemented without compromising the perceptual listening experience that defines your brand? Those were a lot of letters.
Oh wow, he's using their own marketing with us. He's a true listener. It was kind of what I talked about a little bit earlier on. Was the larger tweeter development. We did the same material as our 28 millimeter on the R series, but we went to a larger voice coil to handle playing down to 1 kilohertz, lower frequency. Also, that larger diaphragm we lost our higher frequency output, so we had to do some development. So I actually dimpled it like a golf ball, and that helped stiffen up the dome and brought 6 dB back into our high frequencies with the same dome shape. So we had to stiffen it up a little bit. And so even the waveguide development, the diameter it is, the larger the waveguide is, the lower in frequency that it gives you gain in. And so we helped that to gain, and then also directivity. So it was the waveguide, it was the dome, it was the voice coil size to handle power handling, off-axis response. That power response is what that'll play into, and the high frequency extension. So those kind of brought all the high frequencies back into play. And then also now bringing those next closest woofers closer together and kind of shoving them behind the waveguide. You would think that'd be, kind of a sacrifice. But because of the crossovers and the wavelengths and moving them closer, really that's out of the passband. Between the waveguide and the woofer, so we kind of eliminate some of those problems of the woofers being behind that waveguide. There's still a little bit of effect, but that's mostly eliminated. And then having the excursion, having good sensitivity, and still maintaining directivity, as you can see in our data sheets on the heat plots I was talking about. If you go to our downloads page, all of our data sheets are there. And you can learn a little bit more about that. But those were the things that we did to improve that, to make sure we still kept up to kind of our standards of how we want to design stuff.
Mm-hmm. So there was an interesting question here. Let me find it. So it was on the last question, talking about issues with high frequencies. So, but if you use a system with room correction, can't you fix the frequency issues? So this is, I love this question. So does anybody want to take this? Or do you guys want me to take it?
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So people always talk about room correction. And the thing is, there's physics limitations to a lot of these speakers, drivers, and the room itself. So you can, room correction can do some difference, but you're not going to, and the worst thing in the world is physics. So you're not going to be able to beat it. So, so yes, room correction can be a little cherry on top instead of certain things. Randy was talking about not loving room acoustics or not putting them in certain areas.
It's not that I don't love it. It's just that it's not something that that's not a path I've gone down. I'm sure.
It's an interesting one because you also have psychoacoustics and things like that. But yeah, you can overcome a lot of those things that you hear from the room. But anyway, room corrections, you want to use that for the tiny bit of variability. For me, preferably the low end of the system, the low frequencies in most room corrections, because you're not changing the tonality of the speaker. Once you start messing too much with the high end, you're start messing with tonality. So just a note.
Yeah. Room correction, they're attempting to take, time, amplitude, and phase and manipulate things to make them better. What they generally do is they're making a lot of assumptions in from the measurements. Some of them may be right, some of them may be wrong. And in a different acoustic situation, maybe a very early reflection, maybe it's a very small room, it's going to make an assumption that may be wrong or may be different. So early reflections, generally putting a center channel on your center console and have that immediate reflection off the table, it's going to cause a huge null, and it's not going to fix that. It can't fix that. And it might even screw up your calibration because it really doesn't know what to do with that early reflection. There'll be the impulse response from the loudspeaker, and then like a millisecond later, there'll be another peak, giant peak, which will be from the reflection. And it might say, which one's the impulse? And it might make assumptions of, well, that's screwed up. That's time. It's going to try and overcorrect for something that it can't. And it just leads to a downward path of mistakes. And that's why some people say, I took a calibration 3 different times. I got 3 different solutions. Well, that's because something's in there that's really confusing it and giving it a problem of the assumptions it's trying to manage in the background of the algorithm. So that's generally what happens. Room modes, stuff like that is great. It can be really powerful. It could also ruin stereo imaging. So generally what we do is after we get to the transition frequency, we get that 200-300 hertz, I'll turn off the correction and let the speakers do what they do. That stereo imaging then keeps maintained and there's no overcorrection and processing going on. So that's one method of controlling that.
For sure. Randy, did you need to jump? I know you said you had to jump.
I got kids all over the place.
You're good, man.
Requiring things of me. So
you're good.
I appreciate the invite, and it was a great. Learned a lot today. So, guys, have a great one. All right.
I will see you.
Yeah, great.
Looking
Great
forward to hearing those
again.
speakers.
Yeah, we'll see you next week, man.
All right. Bye.
All right. See you.
All right. See you.
So we've got somebody's asking a question. Again, everybody, we're going to be announcing the winners at the end for all of this, but we got about 9 more minutes, so we can fit a couple more questions. And there's one specific question here that I've been wanting somebody to ask. So for the Perlisten A4Ts, how did they balance the front firing port design with cabinet stiffness and driver limits to extend bass without introducing distortion via high SPLs?
Yeah, so that's one reason why we actually tuned really, really low. So these are tuned at about 22 hertz, A4T, A3T, and that means it maintains like a sealed woofer up until that point. Below venting tuning, excursion goes crazy. It goes through the roof. It's a kind of an exponential curve. At vent tuning, you kind of save excursion. It goes down, and that's why a lot of people use a vent. It's to manage that excursion for the driver. They have 18 millimeters of X-Max, which is huge. So that's one method. Keeping them sealed to a very low frequency also maintains good group delay to blend in with subwoofers when needed, and get that last little bit out of them. And also that port is front firing. It's really stiff because it's all MDF. It's built into the enclosure, so it's about as stiff as a port as you can have. Yeah. So those are all the benefits of using it that way.
Yeah, and that's what I was looking whenever these first came out, and I only saw a small picture of it, and I could not figure out what was on the front. So you guys put like almost that grill over the front port or the front vent. Do you guys do that mostly for aesthetics, or does it serve some functional purpose?
Well, it really was, how do we get a big enough port in there to not have, when you tune really low in a cabinet, the dimensions of the port get really long. And so we don't want it to chuff. So you got to have a lot of surface area. So the bigger diameter you make it, also the longer the port gets. So building it in with MDF and building in some of the corners and stuff like that, and having a massive amount of open area to tune it really low is that benefit. That also makes sure, like when you look at our data sheets, you can see the base slope rolling off. That's because it's an anechoic measurement. It's not an in-room measurement. And then when you get room gain, 6 dB or 12 dB per octave roll off is a sealed enclosure, and room gain is plus 12 dB per octave. So a lot of companies may say, well, I want a lot of bass in my speaker, and they design them to have this low extension. But then you put them in the room and you get this 12 dB boost from the room. Now it sounds boomy and over exaggerated, and the decay time in your room makes it sound bad. So what we do is we have a nice sealed roll off. You get, which is 12 dB per octave. You get room gain plus 12 dB per octave, and you get a nice back to flat kind of bass response. And so that's really an advantage of doing it properly, and that's why we think about those things. You know, we're thinking about how it's going to perform in that room, and we design it properly to do so.
Awesome. So I think we got time for one or two more. All right, let's see. So will the A3m perform the same as the tower if it will be crossed over with a sub? So SPL, distortion, etc. Home theater setup for movies only.
Yeah, and that's specifically, you know, generally where we cross over for home theaters at 80 hertz. Generally, I don't like to go any higher than that. I really want if you start to ask any subwoofer to play higher, even though our subwoofers will, you start to get directional cues, and we really don't want to do that. So 80 hertz really is a good portion. If you listen at lower volumes or we have lots of headroom, I even like to sometimes take that down to 60 hertz. But, you know, some people like a little extra boom. We don't want them to boost a mid-range, you know, from 60 to 80 and get excessive. So it depends on how loud you want to play, how much dynamic range. But that 80 is really a pretty darn good choice, and that's why, you know, most of the time that's what we use. And that's not very much excursion. You could really crank a loudspeaker, especially with this much excursion on the drivers, no problem for 80 hertz, and that allows you to blend in well with any subwoofer.
Yeah,
and not just for home theater, but for music as well. Keep in mind that if the speaker's good, it's great for music and for home theater.
Yeah, and that's something that we definitely design for as well too. You know, why would I give up dynamics and high output capabilities for detail in my home theater? And in my 2-channel experience, why would I give up dynamics for detail and accuracy? Yeah, they're difficult to do, but if you design a speaker well, they can do both. They're all the same situation. You can, and that's really what we really take a lot of pride in, is that we do both really, really well. They're the same metrics to me. Once you hear a home theater that has the detail and accuracy, and it's not about blowing your head off, but when you hear that little tiny, you know, thing from a quiet place, and there's that little creak in the floor, and it's right there, it's placed where it's supposed to be, and it's so clear and crisp and detailed, that's a different experience. Everyone can blow their head off with, you know, a wall of woofers all they want, and, you know, there's still better sounding bass than others, but that is something that's quite unique. That quiet breath, whatever it is, you know, those are the kind of the fun things to hear in a really great home theater.
Yeah, I think there are certain 2-channel speakers that probably, not from you guys, but from certain brands, that won't work in a theater environment just given the SPLs required of them. I think that's the only real difference in playback, is just the volume that you generally are playing back. You know, if the standard does end up staying at 120 or 110 dB, which
we all love breaking it every once in a while, so don't kid ourselves.
yeah, but no, it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, generally, if a speaker can play back any sound super well and super accurate, it's going to do well for music or or theater. And now there are tonal differences that some people prefer. If you're going pure analog on a system and you like a certain sound, and yeah, it's great. But on that same note, so I think we got time for like one more question. So does Perlisten design an anechoic chamber before considering room gain?
Yeah, absolutely. And so people ask this, and I've even heard some rants on, well, that's not how it's used. And well, but as an engineer, you have to eliminate everything except for the speaker. So I can't, measure in a room and say I'm going to tune and design for a room, because everyone else's room is different. So you have to, clear away the mud so you can see what you're doing, so to speak. And that's why we design in anechoic rooms. That's so we can eliminate all the fluff and know what is the speaker doing. My job is to not screw up the source. And so to create the best performing source is to clean out the mud, see what's electrical happening, what's the excursion. Now, when you put it in a room, we get the room gain. And per size, we know where it's going to be. So it's a known factor. We know where it's going to happen. If you want more output, you need more subs, you need more excursion, or you need more surface area. And that's why we truly believe in scaling SPL. It's scaling subs. That's why all of our subs play down to 10 hertz, even our little 8-inch. Now, you're not going to get a reasonable output in a 6,000 cubic foot room, but if you want to mix and match, you could use any price point. In a small office, you will. And if you want more output, you get 4 subs instead of 2. You get better balance and frequency response. You get more output. So for the right job, we felt it's wrong to say you have to buy our flagship if you want subsonic performance. But if you have a small room and you want 2 R10Ss in it, but you listen to subsonics and you listen to movies at 95 dB, perfect. You got the right amount of output. It plays as low as it could go, 10 hertz and below, and you have the same amount of performance. If you got a bigger room, more subs. So that's the cool thing. We don't change frequency response. And that's what people look at our data sheet for subs and like, all these frequency responses look exactly the same. You're like, right. That's brilliant, because you can choose any sub, whether it's cosmetics, price point, size. Some people don't want an eyesore. Some people want a bunch of smaller subs so they can hide them. No matter what your needs are, you can find the right choice for you. And that gives you more options. Sometimes you get you freeze from too many choices, but that's better than having no choice.
Yep. 100%. Well, I really commend you guys for posting your measurements. Those are absolutely great. If you guys haven't seen those, and if you're in the market for a set of speakers in this price point, this is a very good speaker. So we've been really excited about it. So check them out on our website. They do, like I said, they have all of their measurements. If you're curious about those, they have all their clipable measurements, which is really cool. So, well, we're right up here at the end of the end of 6 o'clock Eastern time, end of 5, whatever it is. So let's get to announcing some giveaway winners. So let's start out. Let's go with our RAS winner. So drum roll. I'm pulling it up on the other side. We've got Harry Bishop in West Haven, Connecticut. So Harry, reach out to us and we will get that sub sent over your way. And then for our second winner, hold on, drum roll, please. This is for best question. So this is for a pair of the A3Ms. Don't kill me. I did not pick this winner myself. So this one is for Devin Wildrick. Let's see, let me make sure that's right. Yeah, Widrick. Sorry. So Devin, reach out to us and we will get those shipped over your way. So congratulations, everybody. And Eric, Biggie, Little E, thank you guys so much for jumping on this evening. It was a great conversation.
Yep. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, guys.